Have you ever found yourself explaining your feelings instead of actually feeling them? It is a subtle shift, one that often goes unnoticed in the quiet moments of our lives, where we trade the raw, wordless experience of a difficult emotion for a neat, logical explanation of why it exists. If that sounds familiar, I want to welcome you to this space. And I want to start by saying that this isn't about being too logical or doing something wrong. It is simply an exploration of a very human tendency that many of us share. A quiet way that our minds try to look after us when things feel like they might be a bit too much to carry. Sometimes we use clarity as a form of distance, building a bridge of reasons and insights to keep ourselves from having to step into the cold water of what we are actually going through. This is the art of turning a feeling into a concept, a process where we become the observers of our own lives rather than the participants. And today, we're just going to sit with that idea for a while and see what it reveals. Many people notice that when a situation becomes emotionally heavy, their first instinct is to pull back and start analyzing. It's as if the mind decides that if it can just understand the mechanics of the pain itself will become manageable or perhaps even unnecessary. We treat our hearts like a puzzle to be solved or a case study to be examined, looking for the root causes, the patterns, and the logical conclusions that might make sense of the chaos. There is a deep comfort in why. When we can say, I feel this way because of this specific event or that particular childhood dynamic, we feel a momentary sense of control. We have labeled the experience, and in labeling it, we have placed it on a shelf in the vast library of our minds. But there is a quiet gap between knowing why we are hurting and actually experiencing the hurt. And this is the part many people don't notice. We can spend years collecting the most accurate maps of our inner world, detailing every valley and every mountain peak of our history, yet never actually feel the wind on our faces or the dirt beneath our feet. This is the difference between understanding and experiencing. You might find yourself in a conversation, perhaps after a loss or a disappointment, and realize that you are speaking about your experience in the third person, or using clinical sounding terms to describe a heartbreak that should, by all rights, feel messy and loud. You are making sense, you are being reasonable, and you are being insightful. But you are also staying very, very safe. Logic can create a sort of emotional distance that acts like a buffer zone. It's like watching a storm through a thick double-paned window. You can see the lightning and hear the muffled roll of the thunder, but you don't feel the chill of the rain on your skin. For many of us, that window is a vital piece of architecture. It allows us to function, to keep going, and to navigate a world that doesn't always give us the time or the space to be vulnerable. This is where the distance forms. We begin to value the explanation more than the emotion itself, believing that if we can just stay in the realm of the abstract, the reality won't be able to reach us. It's a protective mechanism, a way the mind creates space from an overwhelming experience. It isn't a sign that someone is cold or emotionally unavailable, but rather a sign that they have a very active, very capable mind that is doing its best to keep things orderly. Some find themselves rationalizing their decisions with such precision that they lose touch with what they actually wanted in the first place. They might stay in a situation that doesn't feel right, because they can list 10 logical reasons why it should work. Or they might walk away from something beautiful, because they've analyzed the potential risks until the joy has been squeezed out of it. The mind is a wonderful tool for organization, but it struggles to hold the nuance of a feeling that doesn't want to be organized. Emotions are often contradictory, inconvenient, and entirely lacking in logic. And that is exactly why they can feel so threatening to a mind that craves structure. Here's what logic quietly protects. It protects the part of us that isn't sure if it can survive the full weight of the truth. When we stay in our heads, we don't have to feel the physical sting of rejection or the heavy, hollow ache of loneliness. We can talk about the concept of loneliness. We can read about the sociology of rejection, and we can discuss the psychological underpinnings of our reactions, all while keeping the actual feeling at arm's length. It is a brilliant, sophisticated way of hiding in plain sight. We aren't avoiding the topic, in fact, we might be talking about it constantly, but we are avoiding the impact. People often experience this in their relationships, where instead of saying, I am scared that you are leaving me, They might say, "It seems like we are experiencing a breakdown in our communication protocols based on mismatched expectations." One of those sentences is a bridge, the other is a wall. Both are true, but only one allows for a connection to happen. The other keeps the speakers safe in their own separate towers of analysis. This tendency to organize discomfort into explanation is not something to be fixed or judged. It's a gift, in a way. The ability to think clearly when things are falling apart is a survival skill. But it becomes a quiet burden when we forget that the map is not the territory. We can know everything there is to know about the ocean. We can study the tides and the chemical composition of the salt water. But none of that is the same as swimming. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to think your way out of a feeling. It's a circular path that often leads right back to where you started. Because no amount of logic can satisfy a heart that just needs to be heard. We might find ourselves over-explaining our past to anyone who will listen, hoping that if we can just get the narrative exactly right, the weight of the memory will finally lift. But the mind cannot release what the body hasn't been allowed to process. This is the quiet gap between knowing and experiencing, the space where we wait for our insights to turn into peace, only to find that peace usually lies somewhere much deeper than our thoughts. Logic and emotion are not opposites, and they aren't at war with each other. They are simply two different ways of processing the world. One gives us the what and the how, while the other gives us the is. When we notice ourselves moving into that space of intense analysis, it's often an invitation to check the temperature of our inner world. It's a signal that something is happening that feels a bit too big for our current capacity. By gently noticing this pattern, we can start to see it for what it is. A hand on our shoulder trying to steady us. It isn't a wall to be torn down, it's a doorway that we can choose to walk through when we feel ready. You don't have to force vulnerability, and you don't have to stop being logical. Logical thinking is a beautiful thing that allows for progress, science, and understanding. The goal isn't to become less intelligent or less analytical, but rather to become more aware of when we are using our intelligence to bypass our humanity. It is okay to not have a reason for how you feel. It is okay for things to not make sense. Sometimes the most honest thing we can say is simply, "This hurts," without adding a because at the end of the sentence. In those moments of raw honesty, the distance begins to shrink. The air becomes a little clearer. We don't have to be the professors of our own pain, we can just be the people who are feeling it. Closing the gap doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't require a grand gesture. It happens in the small, quiet moments when we catch ourselves mid-explanation and take a breath instead. It happens when we realize that we don't need to justify our discomfort to make it valid. As we move through our days, we can begin to notice the shift. The moment we step out of the library and into the sunlight, we can appreciate the books on the shelves, the maps on the walls, and the brilliant clarity of our own minds, while also remembering that the world outside is waiting for us to experience it. Noticing when we move into explanation can sometimes open space for a different kind of experience. One that doesn't need to be solved, only lived. There is a gentle freedom in letting go of the need to understand everything perfectly. When we allow ourselves to be messy, to be confused, and to be wordless, we often find a different kind of strength. A strength that doesn't rely on being right, but on being present. Thank you for taking this time to reflect with me on the ways we navigate our inner worlds. It is a journey we are all on together, learning as we go, one thought and one feeling at a time. If this reflection resonated with you, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for being here.